Hello and welcome to Riverland Women, the podcast which celebrates the amazing achievements and inspiring stories of women across South Australia's Riverland. I'm your host, Kerrie Lush from the podcast station. Join me each fortnight as we meet some of the extraordinary women who call this region home. This is Riverland Women. On this episode, we meet Caroline Phillips. She's the Mayor of Karoonda East Murray. But that's just the start. Caroline's been involved in so many things that have helped put her community on the map. Some of these include the incredible Silo project and helping to create the town's very first childcare and after-school care facility. She's also had a key role in boosting tourism across the region, and now, as Mayor, she's working on all kinds of projects, from upgrading caravan parks to the local sports centre and community gym. It's a far cry from her days dressing up as a koala in Rundle Mall. This is Caroline's story.
So I grew up at Wynarka, about 15 k's out of Karoonda on our family property. So it was my great-grandfather came out and cleared the scrub, back in 1909, I think it was. So, that's where I grew up on the family property and went to school here at Karoonda through until year 10. And then I headed off to Adelaide for a bit of big smoke experience and went down to Marrickville for a couple of years and uni and whatnot in Adelaide, spent some time overseas, but then came back here, I think it's about 17 years ago now, with my husband, wanting to raise a family and experience that part of the community life that we both had growing up, with our kids.
Did you think when you were growing up that you'd eventually come back this way?
I always had an interest in the farm, but I don't know that I ever really thought that was kind of my future in terms of, I studied international business at uni, majoring in marketing and that kind of thing. So that was really where my career was taking me. At one point I did do a bit of work with a mentor at the time and tried to look at, what was important to me and what was driving my passions, and that really kind of highlighted that regional communities was something I was really, really passionate about, and I guess that's what's kind of led me back here and led me into the roles that I'm doing now.
So before you came back, you said you lived overseas for a bit. What sort of things did you do there? Where did you go?
Randomly I lived in Norway, in Oslo, for 6 months. I studied at the Norwegian School of Management. So we were actually doing what was the equivalent of their master's programs over there. It was taught in English. That was an amazing experience to study. I lived in a dorm of, I think it was like 20 other international students. I was the only Australian though, so that was quite interesting. Lived there, made some amazing friendships and learnt a lot and just had that life experience. We were in Paris for the year 2000, which of course at the time when I explain it to my kids now, they just can't understand that we thought the computers were going to make everything stop and planes were falling out of the sky and all the things. So, to have some of those life experiences internationally were really amazing and certainly helped, I think, shape me as a person and my career and that kind of thing going forward.
Yeah. So what happened after that, after Norway?
What happened after Norway? I came home and I tried to get a job, which was extremely difficult because everyone wanted experience. So I was running around trying to, get marketing, advertising positions. I couldn't even get call centre jobs. It was very difficult at the time. So this is back 2001. Oh, that's a long time ago. The year 2000, anyway, so eventually I walked into Harris Scarf, which was one of the only kind of big companies that had a SA head office, particularly in retail at the time, and said, I want to speak to the marketing manager. And they said, well, she's not here at the moment, but the advertising manager is. Do you want to speak to her? And so I did. And I said, I just want some experience. I'll do anything, like give me some experience. Anyway, luckily this woman was a bit of a kindred spirit and put me on for work experience for Harris Scarf, where I did various tasks, including dressing up as Caramello the Koala and handing out things in the mall. She said to me, "You said you'd do anything." I was like, "Yeah." So, I ended up working for Harris Scarfe so I did the work experience and they put me on as a marketing assistant, and I ended up working there for the next few years. And interestingly, was part of the team when Harris Scarfe essentially went into administration, which was a really unique and strange experience at the time as well. So, I ended up working in a few different roles there. I was actually meant to move to Melbourne to this sounds so old school, work on their e-commerce arm, which was called CamWorks, clicks and mortar instead of bricks and mortar. So this was like the start of online shopping. So Harris Scarfe had bought out D-Store, which was one of the first retail online things. And I was going over to manage that kind of arm of the business, which was really exciting, would have been huge. Anyway, in a closing doors moment, they went into administration. They called us all in and said, "Look, some of you won't be here this afternoon. We don't expect you to do much work. We're calling people into the office." And anyway, I survived that. I survived I guess
they need people there to
market
what's left, don't they?
They let go a lot of people, but I was still there, and so I continued to work on there and actually ended up managing the call centre in Harris Scarfe. So they brought everything back in-house because it was all about, shoestring budgets, etc. And continued to work there for another couple of years until the advertising manager that I referenced previously moved on to another role with the South Australian Tourism Commission actually. And I essentially followed her and then started working at the Tourism Commission in the research and communications team, and that was the start of a 10-year stint with SATC. So that kind of started my tourism background, and gained lots of experience there as well.
So that wasn't something that you'd ever sort of thought about?
No, and I think that's one of the things I always reflect on in marketing, and particularly in tourism, is that it was so much easier when at Harris Scarfe you were selling a product, or I'd always say, I wish I was just marketing toothpaste, because when you work for the government and you are marketing regions or destinations, you have no control over the delivery of the product. So it's very, very hard to actually ensure that customer satisfaction and
because everyone's experience is different too, with the same place or same accommodation or whatever.
Absolutely. And then the ability to tweak a product based on customer feedback or what is completely out of your hands. And so, that was something I grappled with. Also coming from private sector into government, like that just blew my mind. The processes and procedures, the time things take, that was really interesting for me. Tourism wasn't something I'd considered at all, but that really has taken me through, a good kind of 15, 16 years of my career working in the tourism industry, and it's been really, really rewarding as well.
What have been some of the highlights of that tourism stint there?
I think, so I've been fortunate to work in both ends of the Murray River regions in South Australia. So I started in what was called the Murraylands then, so based out of Murray Bridge, and then moved on to work in the Riverland for 5 years in each area. And I think looking at when I started, particularly in the Riverland, things were just starting to get some traction. I think Wilkadine Brewery, the Woolshed Brewery had only kind of just opened, and, then the distillery came on board, and all of a sudden we started to get this kind of quantity of product across both regions as well. And the same can be said in the Murraylands. Back then it was kind of like we had unforgettable houseboats. The zoo was a very new thing. Now we've got the zoo and the Bend and, the Bridgeport. There's just a lot of product development that I've seen over my time. So it's really rewarding to see how some of those visions have kind of grown, and people have gone out there and invested their own dollars into actually, developing things that have really been an injection into the local economy as well.
Yeah, well, I guess, the Riverland was really either a houseboat destination or a golfing destination as well back in the day as well. Lots
Absolutely.
Of those sorts of trips.
Yeah.
Or camping.
Food and wine wasn't something really on the radar, and, there's been a lot of work done in that space, and particularly with the, the more boutique wineries, small parcel kind of groups. It's been great to see the Riverland brand emerge and, be recognised. So, yeah.
And I guess it really is that, the last 15 years or so, and perhaps that was Do you think that was brought on by, a need to diversify from a lot of the horticultural crops?
Yeah, I think so. And, we're considering continuing to see that at the moment, the importance of diversification, particularly when you're dealing with ag. Having your finger in a few different pies is certainly beneficial. And, the rise of agritourism is really, on the move at the moment. And I think that's definitely going to be a bit of a draw card for the future as well.
Why is agritourism starting to really build momentum?
It's just it's definitely an increased awareness from consumers in terms of how food gets on their plate, the whole product to plate experience and understanding where their food is made and how it's grown and what the processes are. There's a lot more information around now and a lot more interest there, and I think that really drives tourism is not just about a fly and flop vacation where you go somewhere and just chill out, although that would be nice to do more often than not. But, people are really searching for that educational experience now as well. They want to leave somewhere having, learnt something or, gained something from the experience as well. And I think agritourism has really got the potential to deliver those kind of experiences, and particularly in areas like ours here where there's marginal farming country. I think there's, opportunities here that need to be explored so that there's that diversification and spread of risk amongst different portfolios in a business.
So you're working for SATC, or it would have been known as something else back then, I guess.
SA Tourism, yeah.
Yeah, SA Tourism. They all changed names over the time. And then you came back here?
Well, I actually started working as the regional tourism manager for the Murraylands. So, funnily enough, I was commuting from Adelaide back to Murray Bridge because we were still living in Adelaide at the time. And then my husband, who previously worked for Mitsubishi, was part of that whole, redundancy type thing. So, yeah, he then found work back here, and so that kind of made the decision. And so partway through my tenure in that position, we relocated back here. So at that time, still employed by the South Australian Tourism Commission, but I was managing what was called Murraylands Tourism Marketing. So that was the regional tourism organisation at the time. And worked there until there was a bit of a restructure, as there always is, and a bit of a shake-up in the regions. And then I went on to do another project, actually focusing on visitor information centres for the Tourism Commission and how to make them more commercially viable. So that was quite interesting.
And then back here?
Yeah, well, so then the Riverland after that. And so I picked up, I was doing some consulting at the time. So in between all of this, I kind of started my own business as well, and was doing a few bits and pieces to support, and of course had 2 children during that time as well, just a sideline activity. So I had maternity leave and things like that. But then, ended up working for Destination Riverland as the general manager up there for 5 years. And during that time, kind of at the end of my tenure there, was when I took on the role of mayor here at District Council of Karoonda East Murray. So I had been an elected member previously, but took on the role of mayor, and then was due to wind up in February 2020, which was just when COVID hit, and that was just tragic for the tourism industry and particularly in the Riverland. So I ended up staying on through till September, I think it was, and then finished up there so I could focus more on what was happening here with the mayor side of things.
So I'd imagine a fair bit of travel going back and forth between Karoonda, or you're Wynarka, aren't you?
Yeah.
Back to and up to Berry a few days a week.
Yep.
How did that all fit in? How did you manage that?
Well, thankfully, Optus came to the party and adjusted the phone coverage during that time, not just for me, but because prior to that it was a bit of a challenge with phone service. But driving is just part of our everyday life out here, and I'm a sucker for a good true crime podcast, so they got me through. Although, when you're out the back of nowhere and you're listening to something like that and it's dark, sometimes it's like, maybe I should rethink my subject matter here.
Did you work out how many kilometres you do a week or a year?
No, it was crazy. I was only talking to my daughter about it the other day, and I said, do you remember when I was doing that? Because it was at least 3 days a week I was up and back, and I didn't stay up there because I wanted to be back here for the kids. So I was still fairly young at the time as well, and Yeah, no, she didn't really remember. So
all these things we stress about.
That's it.
They don't remember. So you're on the family farm, like you're living there. So, and are you both working on that as well, or?
Yeah. So my husband works for a machinery dealership in town here as well, and then in addition to the mayoral role, I'm still operating my own business at the moment, and doing some consulting in predominantly in the tourism space. So I'd like to say that I work on the farm. Not sure whether he would say that or not. We're very small scale though, so we're really just doing cereal cropping, and it's more of a hobby farm in terms of the kind of size of what we're doing. But we are lucky, particularly in the climate at the moment, that we do have off-farm income, and so for us it is a labour of love what we're doing there. But yeah, certainly the seasonal conditions do impact as well.
Back when you were travelling up and down to the Riverland for that role with Destination Riverland, how did you manage with kids? I know you just seemed to do what you do at the time, but when you look back now, do you think, how did I do it?
Well, interestingly, we had a bit of a role reversal at the time. So my husband had taken a break from the work that he was doing with the machinery dealership, and he was working kind of more part-time as well for another farmer. So he was able to do all the drop-offs, pickups, all that kind of stuff. Whereas when I finished at Destination Riverland, then he took on the full-time role. So we kind of, swapped that way. So I think, they were the things that, definitely we wouldn't have gotten through that if we weren't working as a team, and also family. So we're very lucky that both my parents and Troy's parents living locally here as well, and so they were always around to pick up. So the kids, they were never left waiting at the bus stop. That always worked out, but having that family support is just so significant. I think sometimes, being a couple of hours away, and I remember getting a call from the school saying, oh, Rebby's hit her tooth and we think she needs to go to the dentist, and that was always a bit like, but I think one of the great things, and I've always said about the local school here, is that, the amazing staff, and so it wasn't like, I'd feel like, oh, my child's alone, because they're there with, someone who's also their netball coach, or someone who is also their neighbour, or, that close-knit school community that you have in regional towns is exactly why we moved back to here to start off with as well. So
that village.
Yeah, absolutely. And, so those kind of things made it easier. So, it was a team effort, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So what led you to local government?
That's interesting. That was actually when I was on maternity leave with Ruby, my eldest. So I've actually been an elected member now for 14 years, and it was suggested to me by, I hadn't really thought of it before, to be honest, but it was suggested to me by someone in the community. Thought maybe I should put my hand up. So I was like, I'll have a bit of a read about this. So prior to that, I had been kind of interested in board work and that kind of stuff. So this seemed like a logical kind of, continuation of that theme. And basically I was an elected member for, I think it's 2 terms before I then became deputy mayor. So that progression through has been really, really interesting to see different councils come on board as well during those times. Elected members change and different themes and needs within the community as well. It's there's been a lot going on in that space over that period.
Did you have particular things that you wanted to work on or raise when you first were elected?
I think it was just more about providing a diversity of voice. So when I first started, most of the elected members had been on for like a minimum of 10 years, some 20. Fantastic contributors to the community and wealth of knowledge, but definitely local government was really pitched as something you do when you're retired, because you just don't have, at the time, they were day meetings. So I was on maternity leave and they would go all day, like 9 o'clock, 3 to 5, and you just can't logistically do that if you've got employment elsewhere. So that has been a bit of a barrier for local government, I think, and certainly there's some progression made in that space now as well. But yeah, it was about providing a diversity of voice, really, and just getting some different opinions and different perspectives across the table.
Since you have been in local government, there's been a huge number. Looking from the outside, there's been so many projects that have been implemented in this council area. Yeah, do you want to list off some of the things that you've sort of brought in or helped contribute to?
So I think one of the things to be aware of in this council is we have such a small ratepayer base. So I think it's something like 1,092 ratepayers. So the funds that we receive through rate revenue are a really small percentage. So our overall revenue is about 70% federal grants. So we're very, very heavily reliant on that. And we have a huge unsealed road network to maintain here. So something like 1,500 kilometres of unsealed road that we need to maintain. So that's a huge exercise, costly, base level services that we are legislated to provide before we actually get on to doing anything else. So for a long time there hadn't been anything really new built or developed in terms of infrastructure because we just literally couldn't afford it. We also don't have any debt in this council, so we've never actually gone into debt specifically to build things as such. During my time as mayor, I have been extremely fortunate too. We've received funding from the federal government for the Drought Communities program. So it was back in, I think it's 2018, we received $1 million of untied funding. So for us at the time, that was like a quarter of our annual operating budget. So our annual operating budget is like now it's 5, but it was $4 million at the time. So that was huge.
So untied meaning you could do whatever you wanted with?
The general guidelines were around it needs to stimulate economic growth within the region. So it's about creating a resilient local economy and preparedness in times of future drought. So it was quite topical at the time because people were kind of like, why aren't you giving it to the farmers? But it was absolutely about, doing other business to that whole diversification thing that we were talking about before. So some of the projects we did at the time that I am very, very proud of, and the one that I think has had the most impact on the community has been the childcare centre. So we designed, built and opened a childcare centre in something like 9 months, I think it was. We utilised a car park at the back of the institute and built off-site using a South Australian company, a modular build that was brought down here on the back of semis and craned in, and created this childcare centre that now employs, I think it's 6 or 7 local staff. It operates 5 days a week, and the flow-on benefits for that have been so significant in terms of, friends of mine that previously were unable to undertake further work and things like that have now been able to actually, go on and take up local jobs that they couldn't before because they didn't have that support. We also provide after-school care and before-school care, which was something we'd never done before. So for me, that has just been a real game changer for our community and a service that has been lacking here.
And with the way that things are with remote working these days too, I guess people can work for businesses outside of the region that then brings more money into the local community.
Absolutely. And, the staff there, we had a lot of those staff were travelling outside of the region to work in the childcare sector. So being able to keep those jobs locally has been, a great win for us. So in addition to the childcare centre, which has just continued to grow and expand, the silo project, and that's been huge. And it kind of at the time it was like, oh, everyone's painting silos, are we going to get on board? And it's like, no, we're going to do something different. And so we created the first Australian day-night experience here. There was much debate about what we were going to actually paint on the silos, and that's an exercise that I don't want to go through again anytime soon. Sitting around in the chamber debating the merits of various artwork with elected members was interesting, but we have the beautiful mural there which depicts, the sheep and the agriculture in the area, and of course
and the dog,
the dog, which happens to be my dog. I don't know if you knew that.
What's its name?
Whiskey.
Is Whiskey still with us?
He's actually older than my daughter, so he's 13. I left him on the couch this morning on the veranda. So that was quite a fluke, really. We were looking for just some stock shots, and I like to mess around with the camera a bit, and so I'd just given some shots to the staff, and then all of a sudden there's Whiskey. So, yes, he's been in to visit the silos and done some meet and greets when they were first, when it was first
Media
opened.
star.
Absolutely. But yeah, so we've got that mural. But then the most exciting thing, which not everyone knows, is that we have a nightly projection that goes on. So we work with a curator in Adelaide, and we have a monthly exhibition which features a different artist. So there's some amazing pieces of artwork that go on there, and it's changing all the time. So it's about that reason to come back and stop, and it's about that overnight visit. So in conjunction with doing all of this, we did a bit of an upgrade at our caravan park as well, because it's one thing to have something to look at night time, but you need somewhere to stay. And so we've got some great little eco cabins down there now, and the caravan park it's amazing to see how that has grown over time. And back when I was working at Destination Riverland, I would get excited if I'd drive past and there was one van in there, and now it's often booked out quite regularly. So, that's been great. But we've been able to use the projection to do different things. We've just recently participated in the Sala Festival, but we've also had stuff like Science Week. We had some animation that was done for that. Anzac Day, we've got a digital storytelling piece that features a lot of the original kind of images and things of locals, and tells the story of the role that they played and the role of this community in World War One. We've also done things.
You've got the new playground.
Oh yeah, so the playground happened during that time as well, which was very exciting, and again, reasons for people to stop. And then we've gradually kind of worked through. We've got the shuffle screens, which is another piece of artwork down in the Main Street there. So it's been about creating little reasons for people to stop, to spend their money in the local shops here, and essentially boost that visitor economy.
And even toilets. Haven't you done some toilets and playgrounds around some of the smaller towns as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So the playground that was here was relocated out to Wynarka, and so there's now free camping available at Wynarka, and at Wombi the playground was refreshed there and toilet facilities created up there as well. So it was about bringing in some of those smaller communities outside as well, and linking them in with the main township. So there are a couple of projects. One of the other ones that is really cool has been working with our sporting facility down here to develop female change rooms, so new change room facilities, but also a community gym. And the community gym here has kind of been in existence for a long time, and it's moved from everywhere from the golf club to the institute to the shearing shed up at the depot, but now it's got its own specific home. And I think we've got something, on last count, something like 60 members are utilising it. So it's
for a town of how many people?
I know, 350 in the town. So that's broader district people coming in as well, and so it's open 24/7 essentially. You just use a PIN code to get in, and we've just recently had some new equipment put in there as well. So it's a great story of community coming together to look after their health and wellbeing. So that one was done with state government funding through the Office of Rec and Sport, that building. So I think we've had a lot of building and development during quite a short period of time, which is something now we have to look at consolidating and making sure that we're dealing with the lifelong costs of these kind of developments. But to have this new infrastructure is it's been a game changer in a lot of spaces, and really has created new opportunities for the community. So something that I'm really, really proud of.
What about business wise? Has it had an impact on local businesses or encouraging more businesses to the region?
Yeah, so we did have a couple of new businesses that kind of started up in line with the silo art projection. So Kathy's Cafe started and still going really well. We had another cafe that was kind of operating and has now closed up. So it definitely stimulated some activity in that space as well. It's also just about creating awareness as well, I think. So we've got some big businesses here that machinery businesses I was speaking about before that service clients across the state, and creating that awareness of Karoonda and the types of things that we have here really helps to build the profile, not just for visitors but for businesses operating in the region as well.
What do you think all of these developments have done for the morale of the people in the town?
I think they're proud. Often, interesting, we had the Minderi Halidom races just last weekend, and people travelling through, popping things up on Facebook about how great the town looks and things like that. And a lot of locals have shared that post recently since the weekend. And I think it just it creates that self-pride. Often in a town, a small town like this, you can be quite critical. You're always critical of your own backyard. So to have that exposure and see the response that people travelling through and what they think about the town and what we've done and what we're doing has been, really, really beneficial for the community.
So we've talked about the good things and the achievements and that sort of thing. Are there any downsides to being mayor of a small town?
Oh, yes. It's hard. It's, you're never really off the clock. So a day at the footy will always include a discussion about someone's road or pothole or something like that. And that's okay. I think, one of the things about being in local government is you are there to represent your community. So if your community are not talking to you, well, then you're not doing your job. And so that's one of the things is really that always being on the clock and always being approachable for people to come in and chat to you. Sometimes that's hard in that sometimes, people make assumptions about certain things and not come in and chat to you. So that's something I really try and, reinforce and be available and try and encourage my elected members to be available and have those what are sometimes tough conversations in the community, because a lot of the time, we have to make tough calls in here around, expenditure and those kind of things. And there's a rationale for why we do what we do. And so explaining that usually helps definitely helps. They're the kind of difficult conversations that need to be had. I think one of the challenging things for me, but it also was a positive experience in the end, was leading the council through COVID. That was just, to use the word, unprecedented times. But, it was, quite surreal. I mean, I was putting out video messages to the community and just trying to reassure and... that was challenging, but I think as a community we were on the front foot with that, and the staff in here were really great. They were checking in with all our local businesses and trying to understand distribution chains and what if, and we had someone making calls to all our elderly residents to make sure that they had support and had a plan if with lockdowns and things like that. So whilst that was scary and challenging, that was also rewarding to be able to have come through that. It's such a significant event in history. With any leadership position, though, in small towns, it is absolutely about just being really open and transparent, and that justification of why decisions are made. And some, at the end of the day, you're not going to please everyone. Unfortunately, I've had to kind of, come to terms with that. I don't like people not liking what I'm doing or saying, or but at the end of the day, sometimes you're just not going. You've got to pick your battles. So
What helped you develop those leadership skills?
I think probably from an early age, doing things in a small school like Karoonda, there were lots of opportunities to do things if you wanted to do them. So I participated in lots of kind of leadership style stuff there through SRC and things like that, and went on to do, I think I did a leadership program through Rotary and those kind of things early on. But then the non-official stuff as well. I think when you're working and living in a small community, having to get involved in volunteer stuff, and I think sport is such a fabulous activity in small communities, not just for the physical and health benefits, but also for building those leadership skills and, taking on roles of executive roles, president of the netball club and things like that. They have helped in terms of people management, and a lot of it is just people management, understanding that different things drive different people and how to get the best out of them in different situations. So I think those sorts of things have definitely helped. The mentoring stuff I spoke about earlier, I was lucky that I kind of had a few mentors during my career that have really guided me in that space, and having those people that you can call on for advice and support. And I mean, that goes through now, I think, in the mayoral role. We have a really great group of local mayors across Murraylands and Riverland, and we're all quite well connected. So there's often, we'll pick up the phone and talk to each other about things that we might be experiencing or challenges or ideas. And I think, learning off other leaders really helps to kind of develop your leadership skills and assist in that way.
I'm just thinking too, there's a lot of women in those mayoral roles around this part of the state.
There is now, but there wasn't. So when I started, I was the only mayor. I was the only female mayor of the 8, and that was also an interesting exercise. But now, so I think there was something like, I'm not sure the exact figures, but maybe something like 9 female mayors in South Australia before my first term, I think, when there was something like 30 of us. And so there's been a huge increase there, which has been great. And then particularly locally, as you said, so Ella in Berry Barmer and Simone in Mid-Murray, it's great to have, diversity of that conversation and different ages and different experiences bring quite a different subject matter and context to some of the discussions that we have as those group of 8 mayors as well.
And you said 14 years you've been in local government. Is there anything that's sort of been quite unexpected that once you've stepped into the mayoral role?
I think probably just a lot of the legislated stuff that we just have to do here anyway. And I think the gap in the community understanding and that whole, roads, rates and rubbish thing, which is what people think is all that we do here. So I probably, those kind of things have been learning curves for me. I think one of the challenges though as well is still the lack of formal acknowledgement of the local government sector around contributions in as the third tier of government. So, federal, state and then local government being the closest, but still kind of being the one that gets handballed everything, which happens so often, cost shifting across state and federal through to local government. I mean, those kind of things, sometimes I just go, really? Are we really doing that now? What are we not doing as local government? And particularly in small regional local governments, the breadth of what you're dealing with here is so significant. And, as a mayor and as an elected member, we're meant to be dealing with the strategic management of the organisation, and yet at times we do need to get operational because that's just the nature of what we're dealing with here. And I think what's becoming more relevant, or not relevant, but obvious to me at the moment as well. So one of the other things I do, I also sit on the Local Government Association of South Australia on their board, as well as I'm actually the president of Murraylands Riverland Local Government Association as well, and I sit on the South Australian Regional Organisation Council. So I'm in some of those leadership positions where I'm at the table having a conversation with other mayors across the state, and the gaps between in both understanding and knowledge, but just completely different ball games in terms of I'll be sitting at the LGA board table with the mayor of Port Adelaide Enfield, and then and we talk about how many types of issues that they're dealing with and then the types of issues that we're dealing with, and sometimes they're just poles apart, and yet we are both legislated to deliver a same level of service, and the funding is that's a whole nother conversation, but the way that funding is distributed through local government is completely different. And so just understanding that I'm sitting here dealing with roads that aren't sealed, and some of these metro councils don't even have an understanding of that,
What an unsealed road is.
Like a friend of mine who sits on another board with me will say to me, I've got more people in streets than you've got in your whole district, and it's like, yeah, I know, but we're still obligated and legislated to provide that same level of service with a minimal ratepayer base and heavily reliant on this funding that's calculated through these formulas that just blow your mind and are all dependent on a whole range of factors. So I think that's something that's really become more and more prevalent to me in recent times, is just that gap between, there's the local government and then there's local government, and we are operating quite different organisations.
How time-consuming is it being a mayor and an elected member?
It's as time-consuming as you want to make it, I think, and I have elected to move into some of those other leadership roles, really because, again, I want to provide that diversity of voice. So I'm the second smallest council in South Australia, but I want to be at that table with, the Port Adelaide Enfields and the Mitchams, and I want to be there having a voice for the smaller councils and providing some of that education and context, because you don't know what you don't know. That stuff can be really time-consuming because you're also there, it's not just sitting around having a chat, obviously. There's a whole lot of, work that goes with managing those organisations and, papers, and there's lots of reading prior that needs to be done, and sometimes I'll be reading stuff that is completely irrelevant to, what I'm doing here, but it's part of that role, on the state body. So it's what I choose to do, though. So I acknowledge that. But I really think as an elected member, it's you get in what you put out, and it's really important to do. It's not just the monthly meeting. It's important to do that work in your community outside of the monthly meeting. It's about getting that interaction.
And then your other work roles, I would imagine, have come in handy with your mayoral role as far as your grant writing expertise. And tell us a little bit about some of the other work that you do in your other part of your life.
So my marketing consultancy business is really, well, I say marketing consultancy, but it's really been working with predominantly regional businesses, small businesses around things like business planning, strategic planning, grant writing, social media management, that kind of stuff. I did just recently kind of moving into a different phase, but over the last 2 years I have had an employee who was doing a business admin traineeship with me, which was really great to be able to build the business a little bit more. I think we do a lot of award submissions, so writing tourism award submissions, and whilst they sound fun, they're actually like 10,000 words business planning documents, and that kind of stuff is really rewarding when you're working with a small business and you can see, that a set of outside eyes can just identify different areas, and small tweaks can really make a big impact to their bottom line. So that kind of stuff has been really rewarding. Just recently I've moved into a bit of a different space. I helped a client with some funding for mental health support in regional areas, and so she received funding to deliver mental health support. So those kind of things are, quite the impact that they have on the ground is just huge. Doing the grant applications for things like I did a lot of tourism development fund applications a little while ago, and a lot of those got success. And so seeing an operator that was able to build a new all-accessible cabin to add to their, suite of products, or funding for, I'm trying to think what else we did. We got a lot of them at the time. Just seeing the impact that kind of money could bring into a business has been really rewarding.
I don't know whether the general population probably really realise what's involved in some of those applications. Like, they are enormous, and you must really be a stickler for detail and processes to be able to go through all of that.
Well, that's certainly where my employee was very useful, because I tend to be more the creative kind of ideas person. But yeah, there is so much detail that comes in with those, and budgets and financial projections and things like that. So really doing that whole business case around, this amount of money means this, but that also translates into this many jobs and flow on benefits. So there's a whole lot of kind of economic stuff around that as well, which and a lot of these clients I've worked with over a number of years, so sometimes they've missed out, and then when they finally get it, it's it's really exciting. So
a bit like winning the lottery, wouldn't it?
And I'm very competitive, so I don't like losing, and so even when they're grants, I feel like they're awards. It's kind of like I like to win on behalf of the client. So, those kind of things, just being able to assist small business and working with them right across South Australia as well. So the majority of my clients are actually, Eyre Peninsula based. I've just done work over in Port Lincoln, York Peninsula based. So, quite broad and quite diverse as well, And often my stuff comes from referrals, which comes from the network, obviously, of where I've worked. But, randomly someone will ring up and say, I'm thinking about starting a glamping business on the Eyre Peninsula. What do I do? And so, we worked with that client to do a business plan, and then now having a look at their website and seeing the shots of this amazing experience they've created, that kind of stuff gives me a buzz and keeps me going.
Yeah, and it must be, it breaks things up a bit, I guess, from doing the local government side of things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm also on the Tourism Industry Council board as well, which is great for that kind of, extra keeping my hand in the tourism space, as well as Netball SA I'm involved in as well. I'm on their board as well because I'm a netball tragic, and I really enjoy that. They're both volunteer roles, but I really enjoy that in terms of learning from others in, the leadership space as well, and the way that, different people tackle different things. So
you've got 2 daughters. What do you hope that you're sort of showing them with what you're doing in your leadership roles?
I think one of the biggest things that I like to try and instill in them and other young people in the community is that, you know, you are only limited by your imagination and your ambition. So I hate it when people kind of reference, oh, you know, regional, well, we can't do that or we can't aspire to that. I think you can be whatever you want to be. And so I really try and encourage them to strive for other opportunities. And if the opportunity is not there, we'll create it yourself, you know. And I think that was one of the big things with kind of operating my own business. It was a bit like I needed to do something to fit in with where the girls were at, to fit in with the local government stuff, you know. So create that opportunity for yourself and make it work.
And what do they think of what you do?
They're at that teenage age at the moment where everything's a bit cringy, but no, I think they're proud. They, you know, I think they see me as someone who has the ability to influence change in our community, and so I think that helps them to realise that, you know, anyone can do that with the right intent. So yeah.
Excellent. Now, I have a few quick questions which I throw in at the end of each interview. So if you're willing to give some of them a go. So, favourite place in the Riverland or Mallee and why?
So one of the very, very best experiences in the Riverland for me has been canoeing in the backwaters, and it was like this whole revelation for me because the Murray's very different down this end. We don't have as many, you know, creeks and backwaters, and just the magical experience of canoeing those network of creeks and stuff outside Wynarka is just amazing, and yeah, there's nothing better.
Best advice that someone has ever given you?
Even if you're not feeling it, put on your lipstick, go forth and be fabulous.
And who gave you that advice?
One of the mentors. Yeah. A lady that I've worked with a lot and, resonates with me. In fact, I've got it printed out and it's sitting by my desk.
Excellent. What's one thing that people are generally surprised to find out about you?
Well, funnily enough, when I'm out and about and people don't know me, they are usually surprised when I say, or someone who's with me says, this is the mayor of our local town. So not so much now, but particularly when I first became the mayor, that was, people were quite surprised about that.
And what's one skill you've always wanted to learn?
I wish I could read music. So I learnt the piano when I was younger, but I was terrible at really taking in the whole music reading side of things. So I can play like 3 songs and that's it. I would like to be able to sit down and play something.
Excellent. Well, Caroline, thank you very much for having a chat to me on Riverland Women.
Thank you.
That was Caroline Phillips from Wynarka. If you enjoyed today's chat, don't forget to follow the podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. And if you could leave a quick review, that would be awesome because it helps others discover the show. You can also find us on social media to stay up to date with new episodes and get a behind the scenes look at what's coming up. Thank you for listening to Riverland Women.